Hey everyone, NinjaBay here with another tutorial on how to bring LEGO assets into Tabletop Simulator for miniature games like Brick Wars. Today we'll be doing the most important thing that we can do, which is to bring a minifigure into Tabletop Simulator. So as per the previous tutorial, I'm in Mecha Bricks and I've put together this nice Imperial Magic Straight regular soldier. This was designed by Red Rover from the Brick Wars forums. And we're going to be exporting that so that we can bring it into Blender. If you've watched the previous tutorial, all these steps should be quite familiar to you. If you haven't watched the previous tutorial, I recommend you go back and watch that one first. I'm not going to be explaining things in detail here. This minifigure in particular is great because it's got some transparent elements, and that's going to be pretty important in your LEGO rendering career. So I'll show you how I am dealing with these transparent elements for Tabletop Simulator. All right, we're going to go over to Blender, and I've loaded in here what I'm calling my Minifig Template. This template will be available to you in a link in the description. This template includes a clean mesh for the minifigure itself, a skeleton so that you can rig the minifigure into whatever pose matches your unit, and as well as a collider mesh that you can use in Tabletop Simulator. We're going to save this template as a new file. We're going to call that IM regular for Imperial Magic Straight regular. And I'm going to bring in my Mechabricks file. As usual, this is way too big, so we're going to transform that down by a factor of 25.4. We are basically having to switch from millimeters to inches for the sake of Tabletop Simulator. And we're going to zoom right back in. Okay, so you can see right away that there are some issues here. For example, the arms are not aligned, and you can see that the head from the template is clipping the air tanks on our minifigure. So we don't want any of that. We're going to use our skeleton to clean this up. So select the minifigure up here with the little man, and then go to, from object mode, go into pose mode. You can see the skeleton is now bright green. Now, any piece of the skeleton that can move is green. There's this one part of the skeleton, this pyramid, that's gray. That's sort of the fixed spine of the skeleton. So in here, if you download the template and play with the skeleton, you can kind of see what each joint is capable of. This is the shoulder joint, so this is what we're going to be using to rotate the arm into place. We're just going to get that kind of as close as we can. That looks good. If it's not perfect, that's okay. We're going to kind of make up for the imperfections in the bake. And then let's go over to the head. So for the head, we're going to be translating instead of rotating. So we just select that bone and we translate it up until it kind of lands in the right spot. I think that looks good. We're kind of judging by where the two meshes overlap, as you can see. If you wanted to get into even finer detail, you could switch over to wireframe mode and take a closer look. We're going to switch back into object mode. I'm going to select my skeleton here by going to armature, and I'm just going to hide that by unchecking here under visibility, show in viewport. And something has gone wrong. So that's not quite what we wanted. Instead of doing it that way, we're going to just uncheck in front. That'll put the skeleton inside the body. That'll work for what we need to do. Now, for Tabletop Simulator, we'll need to duplicate some of the meshes, namely this gun, and this air tank, and this helmet. And you'll notice that I haven't selected any of the transparent parts yet. We're just going to start with opaque parts. So let's duplicate that by pressing Shift D. We're going to leave it in the exact same location by pressing Escape. And then we're going to right click and we're going to unparent those from the Mechabricks model by going to clear, by going right clicking, going to parent, going to clear and keep transform. And you can see that's created 5 new parts. These are still in the collection I am irregular from our Mechabricks, so we're going to drag that out, put it into the main scene collection, and then we're going to select the template fig mesh that's here under minifig, and we're going to hit Control J to join everything together. Let's hide our Mechabricks model and just take a look at our template figure. One of the first things we're going to do is remove the materials that go with these. You can see these gray parts, for example, and the helmet and the air tank have their own materials as well. Those are all these MB materials. We don't need any of those for our mesh. The next thing I'm going to do is work on remeshing. So I'm going to go into edit mode. And you can see actually this is an interesting thing to take note of. The skeleton stops acting on the model in this mode. That's perfectly normal. And we're just going to, I'm going to take some time to remesh this model by kind of removing some of the interior elements and some of the sort of extraneous details that I think could just be dealt with as part of the texture instead of as part of the model. Because again, we're concerned about performance and the main sort of factor in determining our performance with Tabletop Simulator is the number of vertices in the model. So anything we can kind of get rid of will just make the whole thing run faster. I'm going to hide the head. So I can get rid of some other pieces. You can see there's some like silly nubby things here on the air tanks that I can get rid of. This ring is the bottom of the helmet. I think it's better to keep that on. We can remove the insides of the air tanks. Nobody will be offended by that. Oops. And then for these air tanks, we can just close the loops by merging all these to the center. So there you go. So those are now solid air tanks. Let's go over here to the guns. We can get rid of the insides of these binoculars. Whoops. That part we kind of want. You can see that's the bottom of the revolver. That could get rid of too. And then over here on the binoculars, I think what I'd like to do is actually simplify this model a little bit. So I'm going to get rid of the little inset here. I think that we'll be able to describe that with textures and bump maps. I'm also going to get rid of the sort of stud holder that goes into here. And both of these sides. And I'm actually going to get rid of, what I'm going to do here is rip this edge. So you can see I've separated the binocular handle from the binocular itself. And I'm going to do the same on the other side. I've got to hide this hand though. Oops. Okay, so I've hidden the minifigure hand, and now I can easily grab these edges and rip them as well. That's V is the shortcut for that. So that just sort of separates the edges, and so now where this was once kind of one linked mesh, the front part has been separated out, and I can just delete that by pressing X. What I'm going to do next is grab the edge loop. Should be able to select this edge loop. There we go. I'm just going to bring this out to the front of the binoculars. Let's see, what's the cleverest way we can do this? What we're going to do is switch to vertex selection. We're going to select these two vertices, and you can see this origin is right in the center here. We're going to hit Shift S, which gives us this snap wind selection, and we're going to bring the cursor to selected. So you can see this red and white life preserver ring has popped into the center of these two. Now if I go back to here and I work on selecting this edge loop, you can see again my selection coordinate axis is in the center of this loop, and I should be able to hit the Shift S snap system and bring my selection to the cursor, which is 8. That's not right. Okay. I think what we actually need is selection to cursor with keep offset. There we go. Perfect. Wow. All right. So that lines up really nicely. And now we can do kind of something similar with the other edge loops. So let's we're going to grab the two sides of the circle here, and we're going to bring our cursor to there. We're going to select the edge loop from the front of the binoculars, and we're going to snap those again to the cursor. And let's do the same thing here, starting with where our cursor is going to go. We're going to snap our cursor to the center point on this plane. If we do it correctly, we got to select both sides first. That doesn't look right. Something's not right. Oh, hold on. How did this happen? There we go. Okay, so we fix that mistake. We're going to select this loop again. We're going to snap it. We're going to snap it to our selection, but keep offset. And there we go. So that's our nice mesh. I think we're going to get rid of the insides of these holes as well. And we're just going to let our texture kind of show that there's some inset here. We're going to just merge this at the center so it forms a standard cylinder top. And let's unhide everything we've hidden. We can actually get rid of some of the hand as well. So all of this, and hang on, let's just get rid of that. And I think there's some stuff that's hiding inside there, so let me just hide that. Yeah. These are the hooks from the hands, so let's just get rid of these as well. All right, so there's our final mesh all cleaned up. Let's select everything, and let's do a Smart UV project. with a, nope, that's not right, with an island margin of 0.05. We can leave the angle limit at 66, that's fine. We're gonna hit OK. All right, so now it's unmeshed everything. You can see the helmet there. You can see arms, the torso. All this should be pretty straightforward. One thing that you will have to do when you kind of load this up is replace this image. You can bring in basically any image that's 1024 pixels by 1024 pixels. I happen to have a lot of previously rendered minifigure textures, so I'm just going to use one of those. Doing this replace exercise is just important so that there is an image for us to bake our texture to. So we're going to go back into object mode. We're going to reveal our IM regular guy, and we're going to deal with these transparent elements. So I'm going to select these two elements. Oops, I've selected the wrong ones. We're going to select the two transparent elements, and we're going to separate these from their parent as well. So go ahead and do right-click parent, clear and keep transformation. We're going to pull it out of that scene collection. And we're going to just join these two pieces together. And then we can call this transparent. We can spell that correctly. So these are our two transparent elements. And again, if you go into the material groups, you'll see that there's two materials. That's a little redundant. We don't need both materials, so we can just remove one of them and leave it as a single material. So what we're going to do now is bake our texture. So we're going to grab all the remaining parts. Oh, hold on. We're going to tell first transparent not to render by clicking on the little camera icon. Then we're going to grab all of the pieces from our Mechabricks model. We're going to grab the template fig mesh, and we're going to do for this tutorial, we'll do a quick mesh, quick bake with 16 samples. Bake, we're going to do a combined bake, just to get the color information correct to start. Okay, so we've got our result here, and I've made a small mistake that we could fix, which is just that the margin is too large. Usually I run this at about 3 pixel margin, but that's not a big deal here. You can see that the model has rendered quite nicely. We're going to save this image as our IM regular combined. And we're going to go bring that into GIMP right away. You can see here that the image is transparent. That's why you can see the checkerboard between this. What we have to do on this image is we have to provide the color for our transparent elements. So if we go back into Blender, and we click on our transparent elements, and we look at the shader, the nodes for the shader for that component, it's got a color that you can click on and you can edit. We're not going to edit it. We're just going to copy the hex code, and we're going to create that color in GIMP. And we're just going to create a small box anywhere that we have some space on this texture, and we're going to fill it with that color. So you can go ahead and overwrite the image with this new image. Switching back over to Blender. We're going to keep transparent selected, and we're going to switch into edit mode. And you can see in edit mode that it's got a completely wild UV map. And that's because that's whatever came out of Mecha Bricks models. What we're going to do is we're going to select all of that. We're going to go to Image. We're going to click Reload because we overwrote the original. And now you can actually see in this little corner, there's a little blue box. So I'm going to scale this guy down, kind of to a similar size as my blue box. And I'm going to hit G to move it over to my blue box. And you can see that I'm still a little bit off. I'm going to scale that down a little bit further until it's just well within my blue box and centered. Okay, so let's go out of edit mode, back into object mode. Now let's join these two together. So I'm going to select transparent and then template fig, and then I'm going to hover over my 3D viewport and hit Control J. And now these two things are joined together. We're going to go back into materials, but this time we're not going to delete this extra material. We're going to keep it there. We're going to move it to the top of the list by hitting the arrows on the side here. The reason for this will become apparent eventually in Tabletop Simulator, but what we've got is a single material that corresponds to our transparent materials, and then we've got a single material that corresponds to everything else. We're going to export this to an OBJ file, selection only, because we only have template fig selected. We're going to keep material groups, and then the rest of this we can leave as default. And we're going to call this I am regular. We're going to go over into Tabletop Simulator. We're going to create a new model using the mesh we created and the texture that we created. Let's import that. And again, if you want to adjust this for yourself, you can kind of basically, I don't know what I was trying to say there. What we're going to do next is we're going to go into the color tint and we're going to adjust the color. We're going to drag it down. We're going to use this slider on the right that looks like it's going from white to black. This is actually a transparency slider. White is full opacity, black is full transparency. We're going to hit apply. And something unusual has happened. You can see that the helmet and the gem have completely disappeared. They still have an outline, so the meshes haven't disappeared, but the materials themselves have completely disappeared. So something has gone a little bit wrong. Let's investigate and see what that is. So let's go into our template fig. Let's go into edit mode. And I think you'll see the problem right away if I select the components that correspond to our transparent elements. The UV mesh that we just did has disappeared, which is very unfortunate. So what we're going to have to do here is we can select the material that corresponds to these transparent elements, and then we can click select, and we can just do a UV. We can go to kind of like a neutral view of the model, maybe in orthographic mode, and I'll just hit UV project from view, and that will just project the mesh that's selected. I think if you select anything else, it might mess up our existing UV unwrap, and we don't want to do that. So I'm just going to select the different pieces of our mesh and just kind of overlap them. It actually doesn't care if that happens. And then we'll select our everything all together, and we're going to put it onto this blue box. You can see it's much too large, so we're just going to scale that down until it fits. And then we're going to get out of edit mode. That was all the work that we had to do there. So we're going to try and export this again. We're going to delete this guy, and we're going to bring in a new one. Here we go. You can see what's happened is that our rendered texture has come through very clearly, and the transparent elements are just a block of color. So what I can do is I can right-click on the figure and go to Color Tint, and we'll leave everything the same except for transparency. We're going to bring this down somewhere at the midpoint, and we'll hit Apply. And you can see that that seems to have screwed up somehow. That should have made everything transparent. If I bring this slider all the way down, that's interesting. So I bring the slider all the way down and it disappears. So that's not quite right. Let's bring it up to maybe 3/4 then. What? I know what the problem is. The problem is, I think, kind of esoteric. The problem is this alpha channel, which is what provides the transparency in the model. I don't think that should be stopping us, but that might be what it is. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a layer underneath everything and overwrite the image again. So that's replacing all the transparency with white. Let's see if that works. There we go. It works. Okay, so yeah, removing the alpha channel is what does us in. So you can adjust the transparency until it kind of gets to a level that you like. About half is good, I think, in my opinion. And you can see that, you know, basically this is it. We've got a nice transparent, parts on this minifigure. Maybe you want it a little bit more opaque so that the color is more obvious, or you want it like a little bit less opaque. The trickery that's happening here is that in Tabletop Simulator, the Tint tool, this color tint, doesn't necessarily apply to the whole model when you bring it in as a custom model. When you're in Blender and you have these two different materials, it's assigning groups of vertices in the mesh to a material, and it's creating these material groups. That's what we check off in the object exporter, material groups. Tabletop Simulator only tints the first material, and every other material following that is going to get ignored by the tint tool. The second part of the trickery is in this blue box that we drew. Basically, if you look at the tint that we used, the color is still white, just like it normally would be for the solid parts of the minifigure, but it's just a little bit transparent. So you get the color information from the texture and the transparency from color tint. If I wanted to do multiple transparent colors, I'd do the exact same steps that I used to UV map these parts of the mesh to this blue box, but I would add additional boxes. Let's say I would add a red box in this empty space, and I would put the gem into that empty space. In fact, I could show you. Let's create a little box in here. And let's just put a nice standard red in that spot and overwrite the image. We can go over here and reload our image. So now you can see there's a red box and a blue box. And I can go into my edit mode. And I could grab, so let's say I don't want let's say I only want the gem. I can select all the pieces for the gem. If you were perhaps a smarter man than me, you might come up with a good way to select all these little pieces more quickly. And I can just grab these pieces and change where they are. Oops. We're going to just translate them over to the red box. Oops, things don't go haywire on me here. There we go. So now they're in the red box. And I just go back into object mode and I export this version of the mesh. And I can get rid of this version of the model, and we'll bring in a new one. Bring in all the new pieces. And you can see that the gem and the helmet visor are colored differently. That's exactly what we wanted. And if I make it transparent, the transparency will still be applied to the two materials separately. Or not separately, rather, the colors will still remain different. There is one kind of disappointment about this, and that's because we're using like the very basic tools that are available to us in Tabletop Simulator. If I go in here and I change the color of things, let's say I make everything a nice bright magenta-y color, and I make it solid, it's going to do unusual things because, you know, magenta multiplied with red is still kind of red. Magenta multiplied with blue is now purple. So you do lose the ability to tint the model if that's something that you want to be able to do. But the sort of benefit is that you do get to have these nice transparent elements on your model. At this point, I should be showing you a final version of the render. I showed you a quick version for the tutorial, but this is the final version of our Imperial Magistrate Soldier. Feel free to leave any questions in the comments below. I'll do my best to answer them. You can also find us at our Brick Wars Discord, where we're kind of working on this mod constantly. Hopefully this tutorial has set you up to start bringing in kind of anything into Tabletop Simulator. For the minifigure, it helps to have this template because you'll be working with a lot of different minifigures. But the basic principles from our computer console last time and from this minifigure here are all that you need to start bringing in your own custom models. The next tutorial, I'll probably be working on a small vehicle, and that will be a little bit more involved in terms of the meshing, but the overall process is still going to be exactly the same. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you